the MDG goals, the Millennium Development Goals, one of which is free education for all people. This is 55 years after this was successfully launched in one part of the country. And so the question is, what happened to us? Also remember that in 1977, Nigeria hosted a black, Renaissance, meeting for all blacks all over the world. Also remember that a lot of the countries that became independent today, they will never have become independent without the extraordinary role that Nigeria played in terms of resources, in terms of, finance, and in terms of, logistic support to all these, countries. And yet, several of those countries today are ahead of Nigeria by all the indices of development. The question we must ask ourselves is, what happened to us? So let's go down the history lane. When you go down the history lane, you will find that one major thing, or two major things that happened, destroyed everything. Number one, military takeover. The people who took over government was middle-level captains, young officers. They had national goals, aspirations. They wanted to change the government, to do something better. But unfortunately, their post failed, and it was taken over by the top brass in the army. And of course, these people started to fight over ethnic, nationality instead of, the national, goals. And before you know it, we had a civil war in 1967 that lasted for 3 years, for which over 1 million people were killed. Not to talk of several things that were destroyed as a result. The second unfortunate thing that has happened to us, because that is what kept, that push brought the military to power, but what kept them in power was oil. Once oil became, available in commercial quantity, several groups of army groups began to take over power at different times. And of course, you know this whole story very well. But it's important for us to highlight what are the legacies of military rule for us. Number one, reconstruction without reorientation. We thank God that we fought a war. We were smarter than many other countries. We had very, very able, administrators, first-class administrators who advised the political leaders at the time that the best thing to do was not to punish anybody. It was after this war to agree that we are all fools to have fought a war, and that there should be no victim and there should be no victim. And so we had a good reconstruction program, but unfortunately no reorientation. Secondly, practically all the responsibilities of governance were centralized in the federal government. Powers that used, the responsibilities that used to be very well discharged by missionaries, by states, by regions, were taken over by the federal government. For instance, I used to teach at Obafemi Awolowo University, as you have been told. Obafemi Awolowo University in Ife, Madam Chairperson, and Your Excellencies, was established by the Western Region government. So also are the other first-class universities in Nigeria, like the one in Nsukka and also in Zaria. The federal government took them over and destroyed them. And basically, you will now find a situation whereby we do not know when you are going to. Students only know when they will start. They don't know when they will finish. And so you find a situation where many people are going outside Nigeria to educate their children. And also, we find an indigenization and nationalization. But perhaps one of the most unfortunate things that have happened is the enthronement of federal character over and above merit. Federal character is important. I don't have any doubt about it. But it is never done at the expense of merit. In Nigeria, we have come to believe that federal character is more important than merit, and that merit should not have any place when we are talking about public positions. This is unfortunate. Also, because of this, we destroyed the civil service. We had the military ran a reform in 1988 that practically destroyed our civil service. Basically saying that civil servants should go with the political regime that they have served. And that means that the only group of people that should resist corruption in government were taken out. And therefore, the decay started. And then we had a very unfortunate situation when, the Naira was devalued, and a number of other unfortunate things happened in 1985 under, General Babangida. Anyway, having said that, there are a number of, good things that the military did. One of them was helping to relocate the federal capital. Second, and even more important, is the fact that they created smaller states and local governments that were supposed to be the top tier of government. This is important because in almost all countries of the world, the local governments get more resources, they spend more of the resources of the country because they are closer to the people and they are easier to enforce accountability on them. Unfortunately, the civilians have not followed through on this. But we'll come to it. So I come to the present, the state of the nation, number one. Today, we're the 8th largest oil exporter and Africa's 2nd largest economy, but we still import food and oil, the two things at which we are very, very good at. This is one of the paradoxes of our state as at the moment. Number two, we are completely dependent on oil, 80% for fiscal revenues and 95% for export. Number three is the fact that the growth of the economy has been falling from 6% to 3% between 2008 and 2009. And yes, we had a plan for 2020 that will take us to want to become one of the great nations of the world. And we're supposed to be growing, according to that plan, at the rate of 10 to 12%. But presently, we're just growing at 3%. Inflation has increased. We now have an inflation level of 12.1%, an unemployment level of 30%. The Naira that has fallen between just these 2 years. The GDP has also fallen, but most importantly, per capita, is the fact that the poverty levels have increased. The current surplus has reduced from what we had in the surplus from 11%, from 21% to 11% presently. But perhaps the most shocking is the fact that the infrastructure in the country is decaying. I had the opportunity of traveling to Nigeria as part of a team to do an assessment in the last month in Nigeria, and we found that a number of the roads could not be traveled on. And yet these are roads such as the one from between Benin and Ore that have been like this for many years. Even the one major road that connects the two biggest cities in our country, as I'm sure Madam Chairperson knows, Ibadan and Lagos, remain impassable, and armed robbers will lay people easily on these roads. So we have, some people have said, all the indices of a failed state are evident in our country today. Insecurity, I call it Aba syndrome. Aba is the one city today where people are packing out because they are no longer able to live in that country, that city. But there are other cities like that too, because of hoodlums that could not be controlled by a police that is the largest in Africa. We have the largest police size in Africa. The human development failures are very serious. MDG is just going to be in another 5 years, but we are told, according to the latest OECD, that we may not achieve most of the MDG targets, which is a shame. There's massive youth unemployment. There's a study that was done by the British Council and said 25 million jobs are needed in 10 years. And the problem is that we are now depending on oil that does not generate employment, and we have replaced it, it has displaced agriculture, which is supposed, which employs over 70% of the people, but is not productive. And then we have very serious problems of insatiable corruption amongst the political and administrative leaders, and poor investment choices. Perhaps the most frightening thing is the electoral violence and corruption. The fact that, yes, we can have, elections. I was told many times by many people, they said, oh, you are the only one that has hopes in the elections, because it is not elections that determine who is going to rule. It is nominations. But we are hopeful that something will change, one way or the other, from this day, in God's name. I want to then move on to a number of other things that also worry us. First of all is the fact that electricity